Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday here for Calaveras County. At this time, we'll entertain any public comment. Seeing no one, we'll bring it back. Madam Clerk.
Item 1 is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2.
Thank you. Any public comment on the closed session agenda? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Calaveras County, one of our evening meetings that we hold periodically throughout the year. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Supervisor Mills, would you lead us, please?
Let's begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Report of closed session. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. No reportable action was taken.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have announcements by Board of Supervisor members. Anybody have an announcement? I have an announcement I'd like to announce, and I would hope my Board of Supervisors would join in. Ladies and gentlemen, Texas is experiencing a very devastating flood and hurricane. We saw this with Katrina. We have an idea of what it's like, not to this volume, but we've experienced that in our own. So personally, I would extend my hopes and prayers to those folks in Texas, and hopefully they can get out of this mess and not have a loss of life that we've seen. So with that, at this time, Madam Clerk.
Announcements. This is a time for board members and county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public.
Is there any board member or any staff member that has any information on upcoming events of interest to the public? Mr. Krovis, good evening.
Good evening. Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. I mentioned this at the meeting a week ago, but we are having annual events for residential hazardous waste and tire collection. That's battery oils, paints, tires. We're having them Saturday, September 9th here at Government Center, up at the Arnold Road Yard, and also at the West Point Caltrans yard. I'll put a few flyers outside on the table if the public likes to pick them up, or they can go to the Public Works website. That's it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Krovis. Any further announcements by Board of Supervisors staff? Mr. Maurer, good evening.
Good evening, Peter Maurer, Planning Department. Everyone is anxiously awaiting the release of the final EIR for the cannabis ban ordinance. I just completed my review of the final, what we call screen check draft. It's back in the hands of the consultants and our outside counsel. That should be completed this week, and we'll be releasing it first part of next week. We have tentatively scheduled these planning commission hearings for September 28th and 29th at the town hall. We expect a big turnout for that, those hearings. And then as soon as they wrap up their recommendation to you, we'll be scheduling hearings before this board. So I just wanted to announce that that should be coming out next week, first part next week, and that the Planning Commission will be holding hearings. They want to have enough time to review all the documents. There are also some commissioners who are going to be on vacation, so we couldn't schedule it any earlier. But August 28th and 29th, it's Thursday and Friday at the town hall. I'm sorry, September. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Any further announcements by staff or board member? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will continue as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind that we're going to be actually limited to 5 people standing in the aisle. We have our fire department here. And how many people intend to speak? Could I see a raise of hands? Okay, thank you. Now, this is on public comment, not on an agendized item. Keep that in mind, folks. All right? Mr. Papano, good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Papano Randall Smith, District 3. As you know, last week I came in and gave you an estimate, my estimates based on what Measure C taxes will look like once track and trace kicks in. And as you know, it turned out to be a really big number, $50 million to the county coffers should you regulate, and we collect the taxes based on production under Measure C. Now, like all good researchers, I like to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of the limitations of my estimates, because my estimates were really nothing more than estimates. It's a possibility, could be larger, could be smaller. So, some of the limitations include the assumption that all those who paid their Measure C taxes will actually obtain a license, and that number was about 261. That number could actually be lower, it could be higher, it could be 350, 300, we don't know yet. It also assumes all those who are licensed will use all of their square footage that they're licensed for. Some might not. It assumes a certain level of business, as well as cultivation skills that these businesses have to have. You need both. You need skills as cultivators, you need skills as business people. They may not all have that. It also assumes that those who are cut out by any RR restrictions get grandfathered in, or they're able to move to a suitable location. It also assumes the yields will be at the 50th percentile between the high and the low estimates I gave you, and if you remember, the final number was the median or mean between those two extremes. But we don't know if that 50 percentile was an arbitrary selection. Could be 30 percentile, could be 70 percentile. We really won't know for sure until next year. And then finally, and this is a big one, and that is that the projections do not include the 7% tax on all manufactured goods. If you allow manufacturing, you're going to collect 7% of the gross receipts of those businesses. That could add another 5 or 10 million to the number. So anyway, I've done my best to just share some numbers with you. It's my best educated guess. Even if it's low, as I pointed out before, if I'm off by half, we're looking at $25 million. And what can you do with that? Fund our schools, take care of law enforcement, get good sheriffs, fire, in honor of all these gentlemen here, paying proper salaries, giving each of you guys an assistant, because you all need one, obviously. You work too hard. There's a lot of things that $50 million can do for this county, and I would love to see us get to the point where we all get into that discussion. How are we going to spend it? That will be a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Good evening.
Good evening, Board. Sandy Mitrat, Mountain Ranch, District 2, Calaveras County full-time resident. I want to take a few moments to share with you the tale of a community that is bleeding constituents as a result of many factors. It's my sincere hope that you, as an elected unit of individuals, can help heal the wounds. Think back 2 years ago. There was a fire raging in Calaveras County. Once that fire was out, a new issue began to smolder. It was essentially the beginning of a local civil war. This war didn't include slavery, but it did include an economic component. Prana just spoke to that. The war has now continued for 2 years, while the constituents look to the county leadership for a compromise that brings back a sense of community. As you all contemplate the components of this war, build your strategies, put your troops in place, the community continues to bleed good people. I have a neighbor that is one of 3 that survived the Butte fire. Their house goes on the market this week. They're done, they're tired. The people that are leaving are those who see no future here. They see no leadership. They see no hope for a peaceful compromise. Therefore, they see no reason to stay. If a glut of real estate on the market is what you're looking to achieve, you're winning that war. If an impaired economy is what you're looking to achieve, you're also winning that war. And if a lack of community is what you're looking to achieve, you've pretty much got that one nailed. It's not too late to gather the data points readily available to you to determine a healthy course of action for Calaveras County and apply a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. If you don't move soon, there may not be anything viable to save. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Board. My name is Frances Schabram, and since 2006, I'm appearing here every year talking about the same subject, Gillum Road. Gillum Road is a county-maintained road, but is not properly maintained since 2006. In 2008, I presented you with a letter from the fire chief who said that the road is extremely dangerous, that he will not be able to put his equipment and no water tank will pass that road. 52 people signed a petition to do something about the road and the condition. In 2012, the grand jury deemed the road extremely dangerous in case of a fire or an emergency. Well, Friday, the unthinkable happened. We had a big fire, and exactly what was predicted happened. The fire trucks couldn't go through. I was standing on my property, trying to save what to save was, and saw the fire trucks coming, and I didn't understand why they were stuck on the road. The only thing what saved us was the day without big wind and the fire tankers who came from the air and doused my property. I am praying, I am preaching, I am asking, and I'm begging the county to do something about that situation since 10 years, and nothing happened. So to me, this is gross neglect. But this is not the whole picture. On my road is, for example, one legal cannabis growing, what's not in operation anymore, but became a dumping ground for fertilizer, chemicals, and plastic. If that fire had reached that spot, it would have gone off like a bomb. And right behind it is a development, Cosgrove Creek. Next to it is an illegal growth who is cited by the county and is fully operational since then, and it's running generators in 110 degrees. So this is a scenario. I live on that road. I feel that I'm vulnerable and I am scared. And since Friday, I'm on a jump seat. I came to that county 15 years ago with a big dream. I wanted to be a rancher, and I was in awe about the land. You know what I'm left with? With a scorched property and with hazardous dumps around me, and to be scared like hell. My husband and I, we considered legal actions against the county because we consider that gross neglect. But you know what? I'm a citizen of this county, and instead of spending my energy on stupid legal advice, I really, really want to work with you guys to find a solution for that situation. What I know is not easy for you, but we have, for the sakes of me and the people who live in that area, finally find a solution after 10 years. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Evening, Mr. Stopper.
Ben Stopper, District 5. I come to talk to you tonight. We went to COG approximately 3 weeks ago to bring up the issues in front of Valley Springs Elementary when it comes to access on drop-off and pickup. Mr. Toffanelli, being in that district, heard our cries, and he set up a meeting a few weeks ago to sit down with Sherry Roosh and I and Jeff Krovitz from Public Works. At that time, we discussed our many avenues, and Gary sent an email to Sherry Roosh saying that he would try to get this item onto the agenda, hopefully today. Now, it not being on the agenda, I don't think that's any fault of Gary's by any means. There's a lot of things that fall off, go in, that, there's multiple reasons why it couldn't be here. But I want to bring it to your attention for the rest of the board that this is a safety issue for the children going to Valley Springs Elementary. It's an ongoing issue. They've been trying to pull grants for years. And I would like the support of all the supervisors when it comes to this moving forward, because the kids and the parents there are very concerned. According to Sherry Roos, approximately 50% of those children that go to that school are within walking distance. These kids are walking between cars, and if anybody's been there, I invite you to go down there during the morning or the afternoon, drop off or pick up. It's a bottleneck 2 ways. Gary did make some good propositions. Jeff Krovitz did make some good propositions. Sherry Roos made some very good propositions. This is a big concern. It's the safety of our children, our families that are your constituents, and we need to get this on the agenda as soon as possible so that we can get it forward to COG or whatever available assets are for grants or what the county can do to remedy this situation. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Good evening, Mr. Edson.
Good evening, Cliff Edson, San Andreas. I've been here for right around 15 years or so. Business owner for 14 of those years, and in a very crappy environment to own a business, actually, but we still survive. So, I heard Mr. Stopper talk about his elementary school, Valley Springs Elementary. This thing's been going on for way too long. I see projects that COG does that sidewalks down the middle of a street that, it's in the middle of a town somewhere. I think that the priorities are a little bit mixed up. We have children that are vulnerable there to and from school, or if there was an emergency situation, they have to evacuate the school, where are they going to go? Because that would be a crazy nightmare there. We have fought for funding, and the project has changed over the years and have never been able to secure anything. It's just the same old story. Oh yeah, we'll look for it. Oh, to quiet you down, they tell you, oh yeah, we'll get it for you, and it never comes through. Right now, you have the funds to do it. Right now, you have the funds to fix that issue. You have the funds to help these guys with their budget right now. These guys are running on $250,000 a year, and when you hit 9/11, you expect them to show up in 3 to 5 minutes. Why are you sitting on that money? There is a ton of projects. Blagan Road, you got the bridge up there. Now we're going to lease a bridge instead of purchase a bridge. That's crazy. That's going to cost us a whole bunch more money. The taxpayers, a whole bunch more money. Waiting for FEMA to reimburse you? Let's keep FEMA out of it. You have the money to do it. It's a small investment for a capital improvement like that. Kids are number one. We have Pope Street in San Andreas. I challenge you guys to come down there. I live there, so I see it every single day. Come down there when school gets out at high school or in the morning when kids are walking to school and see how they have to motivate or try to get through the traffic when it's coming down that street. little kids walking down the street. There's no sidewalks. They're walking in the weeds so they don't get hit. And you have the money to fix it now, and you're not. And I think that is a crime, actually. Do something about it. Thank you.
Mr. Edson. Any further speakers? Good evening, Mr. Segala.
Good evening. Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. I have a couple items. One is, look at my, I can't remember anything, so I have to be reminded. One of the things that we can do to increase our economic activity and prosperity in our county is to communicate with the state when they go to pass laws that are repressive on our real estate economy or on our business community. So as an opportunity, in a case of Senate Bill 231, this needs to be opposed, and basically 231 is a blatant attempt to undermine Proposition 218, taxpayer protections, and would allow local governments to raise taxes on property owners by thousands of dollars annually without voter approval. That's what Prop 13 was all about, and then 218. So you have an opportunity now to communicate with your state representatives and also with CSAC and with other associations you may belong to try to do all you can to protect our local economy by opposing this kind of legislation. You might lose, but if you don't try, you definitely lose. I have a minute and 21 seconds, so I'd like to talk on another item. These taxpayer alert public access TV programs are almost like a gold mine of information, because our public officials really talk openly about problems going on. There were many of them never ever discussed here. I'll give you an example. We had an interview with the sheriff, and one of the questions was brought up was the imbalance of salaries and sheriff deputies going to other counties that, like ours, that had better wages, because our wages are low in comparison to them. And it turns out our public, I forgot her name, Hawkins, she did some investigation and found out they weren't going to other counties, they were going to the major cities. And so this idea that I help promote, that we need to match other counties and salaries, was not well founded. Anyway, little things like that on Taxpayer Alert and other programs, public access programs, are really beneficial for people that want to really get a grip on what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Oliveira and supervisors. My name is George Fry, and ever since the cannabis issue has come to light in front of this board and throughout our entire community of Calaveras County, I have probably listened to more than I really wanted to listen to. And back in the reaches of my mind, I remember the cartoon Pogo. And Pogo said, "The enemy is here, and the enemy is us." And what I want to share with you, it's time to do something about cannabis. I'm glad to hear from Peter Maurer that the EIR is ready to view, and we really need to get going with this. We need to have a very tight ordinance and get on with the program. The gentleman that spoke at the last board meeting at 9:30 at night, you were all here and I was here, had some very interesting facts or suppositions, and spoke again this evening. And we really need to get on with it and put it in our rearview mirror and get on with a lot of the other issues that we have in our county. So I implore you that we get on with it and get a very tight ordinance in place and use the money that it looks like we might have to use and start cleaning up the illegal grows and take care of those people who want to be legal grows. So, like I said, I implore you to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Any further public speakers? Good evening, Mr. McManus.
Good evening, Bill McManus. Last week, we attended a meeting of the Fish and Game Commission. It was here last week. It reminded me of some thoughts that we had a couple of years ago when AB 266 was first being developed and coming out of Sacramento. Our suspicion then was that 266 would not provide safeguards for counties. It would not provide safeguards for environmental disasters. 266 was established and structured to clean it up afterwards. So all the damage gets done, and then the state likes to come in afterwards and try to clean it up. Well, at the Fish and Game meeting, and I know our Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting, that's only one agency, but they take over a very big part of what happens on the land in Calaveras County. By their own admission, the people from Sacramento said they are understaffed and underfunded. Some residents came forth to tell them about dogs that were falling over dead after drinking out of a pond that was surrounded by marijuana grows in this county. The first dog was, they talked about, the Fish and Game said, well, that's too bad. I guess over the next 2 or 3 days, the other 3 dogs died. And so the people had to spend a lot of money getting toxicology tests, find out what happened to their dogs. This is an example of how the state is going to fail this county. It's not going to be staffed to prevent anything. They are not going to be able to prevent chemical spills. They're not going to be able to prevent human waste going in the streams. They are not going to be able to prevent anything. That is up to this county. If we don't protect ourselves, the state is not going to protect us. They will come in afterwards and put up lots of yellow tape declaring areas unsafe, stay out, and trying to find money to clean up contaminated properties. If we want this county to be something other than Love Canal or other Exxon Valdez type accidents, we have to take the steps to prevent it. The state's not going to do it. That's why I ask supervisors and CAO Lutz to consider the environmental citation registry so that we know what's going on in our county based on records that come from all the departments that touch these sites. And then that way residents can know if they need to take further action to research what's going on in their area or take preventative measures to protect their property. So I hope that project is moving forward, and I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Is there any member of the public wish to pull any item from the consent agenda? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. 4? Any other items from the consent? 5? Any other items from the public? Yes, sir. 10? Oh, last call. Yes, sir, Mr. Fry. 11? All right, next to last call. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to Board of Supervisors. Any item wish to be pulled from the consent agenda from the Board of Supervisors or staff? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the balance of the consent agenda, moved by Supervisor Mills.
Sorry, not me.
Second. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Clapp, I saw your light on him.
Sorry.
I was misdirected. Supervisor Clapp, could I have you turn your microphone on?
I was going to second it.
Okay. And could I have you repeat your motion?
So moved.
So moved by Supervisor Clapp. Second by Supervisor Mills. Any public discussion? Seeing none, I'd bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0, unanimous. Madam Clerk,
Give me 1 second.
I'll give you a whole minute if you need it.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right.
Item 4 is from Behavioral Health Services Mental Health Program. Authorize the board chair to sign an agreement with Behavioral Health Center Sierra Vista Hospital Incorporated for psychiatric inpatient hospital services in an amount not to exceed $120,000 for a 3-year period of July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Edson.
Hi. I'm not here to challenge it. I think that it's much needed. Been around here in this town for a long time, seen a lot of people that need help, and we seem to just turn them back out on the street time after time after time. Right now we have a young lady in the area. She's going to hurt herself, and she's going to hurt some kids by what she does is she goes around and collects things and leaves them on the side of the road or on people's fences or next to properties, and at all hours of the day and night. And I'm afraid for her because I think that it's just a matter of time. She's going to hurt herself or somebody else. Now the sheriff is fully aware of her. I don't know what they can do about it, but it seems to me like this is the kind of funds that could help somebody like that. She's I don't think she's malicious. I just don't think that she can help it. So we have our fair share in the county, have for a long time. I've been going through this as a business owner for many, many years, and I am happy that we can go out and get this type of funding. I wish we could do a little bit more because I think it's needed. We have lots of challenged folks around. So I am hoping that you'll vote in favor of this and see if we can get Kristen to look for some more help for this area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Edson by the staff or board?
I'd like to make a follow-up comment. I spent about 12 years on the county's behavioral health advisory council, and there is a 5150 code that if a person is a danger to themselves or danger to somebody else, that's reportable, and that person should be off the streets and should be hospitalized for a minimum of 72 hours to be evaluated. And so that should be done.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Once again, any questions from the board or staff of Mr. Edson or Mr. Fry? We'll have you joint present on that. Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Moved by Supervisor Tofinelli, second by Supervisor Garamendi. No further public comment? Then we'll bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0, unanimous. I'll give you a second. Madam Clerk, you ready?
I'm ready. Item 5 is from Public Works to authorize the board chair to execute a Fourth Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement for Environmental and Engineering Services associated with the rehabilitation or replacement of Shad and Whiskey Slide Road bridges between Calaveras County and T.Y. Lin International, increasing the combined amount by $963,986.04 for a new total not to exceed amount of $1,827,059.34 with a term ending December 31st, 2018.
Mr. Segala. Sorry, Mr. Clovis, he pulled it.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. Apparently this has to do with the engineering for a bridge. And there's 2 bridges, and we're talking about almost $1 million per bridge for the design. I'm wondering what the cost of the bridge would be. If the design is $1 million, oh my God, it could be 10 million, 15 million. It seemed like this should not be on the consent agenda. This should be looked at a little more openly as to what's happening there. There's a lot of money being spent, and I know T.Y. Lin is a highly respected consulting firm. I've known them for 40 years. And, but nevertheless, they'll be happy to spend our money. We just need, I think the taxpayers would like to get a better grip on where we're going with this bridges and what the overall cost is. Thank you.
Mr. Grovis?
Jeff Krovitz, Public Works Director. These 2 bridges are in the process. The original scopes of work brought them partway to completion. So the original contracts for both of these bridges was to bring them through project approval and environmental document. There has been several amendments since then, mostly for schedule. But what has occurred on both of these bridges is not changing the cost, the span necessarily of the engineering design for the bridge. There's still going to be $1.5 to $2 million construction costs for these bridges. But what's changed on them is undiscovered when the projects first started, environmental constraints. So to give you an example, on your page, packet page 64, that gives you a list of projects. Tasks 1 through 5 are existing tasks that are modified by the discovery of new environmental constraints and the effects on those tasks to do additional environmental work. And then tasks 6 through 8 brings it to ready for construction to finish the design work and the environmental permitting work. What occurred on Shad was the discovery of an unknown landfill and the discovery of a historic mill site that met criteria for archaeological preservation. So there are additional studies that now need to be performed in order to capture the potential risk of the unknown landfill, as well as to capture mitigation for the archaeological site, the old historic site of the mill, to reduce the potential impacts to less than significant or to change the environmental document to an EIS, CEQA NEPA document. That's where the nature of the costs on the Shad Bridge have changed. So it's a two-part change, again, added scope of work to bring it to construction-ready documents and unknown archaeological discoveries. We had a similar situation on the Whiskey Slide Bridge, which was, again, tasks 1 through 5, changes due to undiscovered environmental requirements, and I'll talk about those in a second, and tasks 6 through 8 to complete your construction, complete your design, ready to build. What was discovered on the Whiskey Slide Bridge was a site with extreme cultural resources sensitivities. That then required the addition of drilling and excavations at the locations of our proposed digging, both in and adjacent to the creek, but also along our approach roadways, to verify that we are not disturbing cultural resource sites of significance. So you can see that item 3.2.3, the additional cultural resources, those are the additional studies, the XP2, the hiring of cultural resource knowledgeable monitors with archaeologists, $200,000 single line item. Kind of similar to what we had going on with the removal of the trees. But those are the laws that we are operating under. For cultural resources, it is Section 108 of NEPA, and it is AB 52 for CEQA. So sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but again, $1 to $2 million bridge, it almost doesn't matter the length, the span, the constraints of the bridge. It is, in this case, completely driven by environmental. So in terms of the cost to the county, these costs are borne in the majority by the Highway Bridge Program, pending available funds. There would, in normal circumstances, be about an 11.5% match of county local funds, but the local match has been provided through toll credits. So excess monies as part of the California toll collection program that Caltrans has essentially donated to these local projects. So it is not an expense to the general fund or an expense to our local RIM fee funds, other road funds. Questions on this item? The reason that it landed on consent agenda, I was led to understand that it was not thought to be overly controversial, even though it's very similar to item 14 that I will be discussing later today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krovis. Any questions by board or staff of Mr. Krovis? Okay. Mr. Fry, could I speak? Could you approach the podium? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Segala, he pulled this. Mr. Segala, could I have you approach the podium?
He does look more intelligent.
I'm not going to touch that, Al. Mr. Segala, the answers provided by Mr. Krovis, other than the fact we could explore the consent agenda issue, did that answer your questions?
It did. He did a very good job in laying out what's really happening there. I wasn't aware of that. And of course, that raised another issue. We're suffering with a lot of overregulation, especially in the environmental area and historical relics and that sort of thing. I think there needs to be reason applied to that process. I'm not saying that we have to dig up an Indian cemetery to build a bridge, but there seems to we've gone too far. The expense put on the taxpayers for the potential benefit is kind of ridiculous, and I don't know if the Department of Public Works can look at that and propose some helpful suggestions to our state legislature that you can follow through with or not. But in any case, these concerns are yours because you set policy and you're representing the taxpayer.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to clarify a point on the consent agenda. Please understand when an item is pulled from the consent agenda, we hear that with the same weight as a regular agenda item. So there's really no different ranking, if you will, of a consent agenda item versus a regular agenda item. Once it's pulled, it's treated as a regular agenda item. I hope that explains some of the issues. Any further comment by Mr. Segala?
No, thank you very much.
I'll bring it back to the board. Board and staff, do you have questions of Mr. Krovis or Mr. Segala? Supervisor Garamendi.
I certainly understand the need to do this environment, but as Jeff and I have discussed many times, sometimes I feel like our consultants take these jobs, go out and find a cultural resource, and change order. And it's like clockwork. It is what it is, and we have to follow the laws. But it does not feel good.
Is that a motion?
And with that, I'll make a motion. Thank you very much.
I'll call for the motion. I think I've got a motion. Moved by Supervisor Garamendi.
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Tofinelli. No more further public comment? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 10 is from Human Resources, to adopt a resolution appointing Kevin Wright as Calaveras County Ag Commissioner, Director of Weights and Measures, for another 4-year term.
Good evening, Mr. Wright. How are you?
Good evening, thank you. If I knew you were going to vote on this again, I probably would have stayed silent.
Could have been a smart idea.
But anyway, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for your confidence in me at this stage of the game. I know we are in a time of uncertainty, and my job and your job are both difficult. There's a huge range of, cultures, you might say, of people in the agricultural community today, and it's my job to serve them all equally and fairly and to the best of my ability. And that's what I plan on doing, and that's what I do. And I do that only because I have your backing, and I have a staff who's very capable and knows my philosophy and are very well trained to do what they need to do and represent the agricultural commissioner out there in the field. So I want to also say that I enjoy working with all the different aspects of the community, whether it's the ranchers or the cannabis growers or the grape growers. They all have their challenges, and it's not just growing a crop. In Calaveras County, they have to market a crop too. So because we're so small, you just can't make it just by growing and selling wholesale. And so I'm always amazed by the entrepreneur ethic that our growers show. Some of them get up to go to the farmers market in San Francisco at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday or a Saturday and take the smaller growers take their product in there and sell to a market where they can get some good product, good money for their product and for their labors. And we have ranchers who work 2 jobs, one during the week, and then on the weekends mending their fences and branding their cattle. And so, I'm just amazed at them and all of them. And I just want you to know that I'm doing the best I can, and I hope I can continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Is there any questions of Mr. Wright by board or staff? Ms. Hawkins? Are you representing staff on this particular issue, or do you wish to address anything? Ms. Hawkins is our Human Resources Director, staff for the county.
Human Resources brought this agenda item to the agenda, and so we definitely are happy to bring this contract forward to the board and to extend another 4 years to Mr. Wright.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further staff or board comments, questions? I'll open it up for public comment. Mr. Segala.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. It's good to say something positive once in a while about people that work with us. And Kevin Wright is a fine man, and he's done an incredibly good job for our county. You may remember in times of extreme emotional feelings and like the drug war, quite often the truth doesn't come to the top. Sometimes we get fake news. Kevin Wright reported on what he saw at each of the registered grows as to the effects on our environment. And he honestly said he didn't see a problem. That took a lot of courage for him to say that, because we've been hearing just the opposite so often. And so when you get a person that not only knows his job and is also honest and also courageous, you want to keep him. And so we certainly recommend you approve him staying on.
Thank you, Mr. Segala. Mr. Edson?
Cliff Edson, San Andreas. I would like to reiterate what Al said. The time that I was on the board, Kevin did a fantastic job. And you're right, it did take a lot of courage to stand up for what's right, and he did that. He knows what's going on in the environment. He also makes sure that our county is, the farmers and the ranchers and everybody else that he deals with, they are towing the line as far as what is environmentally correct. Now, but he also knows the ones that aren't, and he takes care of that. So he has a good relationship with the public. He has a good relationship with the county, and he's does a really great job. I enjoyed working with him because I could always get the truth out of him, even if I didn't like it. That's what I liked about him, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Kevin, and I applaud you for the work that you've done.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any comment or questions? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
I would move this item, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Moved by Supervisor Tofinelli, seconded by Supervisor Garamendi. With no further public comment, seeing none, I'll indicate by saying aye in favor of the motion.
Aye.
Aye. Indicate by saying no in defeat of the motion.
No.
So noted. Motion passes 4 ayes, 1 no. Madam Clerk.
Item 11 is from the Board of Supervisors to approve and authorize the board chair to sign the attached response to the fiscal year 2016-17 grand jury report.
Mr. Fry.
I have no question.
Thank you, sir. Any comments by staff or any comments by the Board of Supervisors? Hearing none, I entertain a motion. So moved. Moved by Supervisor Mills.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Tofinelli. Any public comment? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Madam Clerk, we're going to take a short break. It's been a long day, I imagine, for our staff, especially you. We'll be back in about 10, 15 minutes. Thank you for coming back, ladies and gentlemen. That's always encouraging. Before we get started, I want to make just a quick note. You may see some of our fire personnel leaving. I understand they're getting calls right now for assistance for fires in surrounding areas, so they just don't leave on their own accord, just because I'm talking. So things are going on. Madam Clerk.
So I would just like to note that after item 13, we will be hearing item 20 this evening. So just so you're aware. Item 12 is from the Administrative Office to direct the Auditor Controller to create a Public Safety Augmentation Fund in the County Treasury to receive the Prop 172 revenues allocated to the county, and 2, direct staff to bring the matter back for further discussion during the September 2017-18 final budget hearings.
Thank you.
Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Chairman, members of the board, Bonnie Rich Administration. This item comes to the board for a brief overview of Prop 172 funding, and there are a couple of action item components within this agenda item. So back in the early 90s, the state of California, during dire fiscal times, as they often do, find creative ways to balance the budget, often on the backs of counties. What happened during those tough fiscal times is the state shifted property tax revenues from cities, counties, and special districts to schools K through 14. And this is commonly known as the ERAF funds, which is the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. In an effort to mitigate the adverse impacts from the property tax shifts, the legislature and the governor proposed Prop 172, which was intended to create a half-cent sales tax, which would then provide funding to continue with public safety functions while maintaining current service levels, with this funding to be used exclusively for local public safety services. So in November of '93, statewide special election, California voters approved the constitutional amendment known as the Local Public Safety Protection and Improvement Act of 1993. And the purpose and intent of this was not to increase the annual allocation for public safety funding, but rather maintain those funding levels that were otherwise adversely impacted by the ERAF shift. So with that, we have a requirement pursuant to government code that we are to create a public safety augmentation fund. Currently, Calaveras County does not have that mechanism in place. So one of the action items in this agenda item is to ask the board to direct the auditor's office to create that special revenue fund in the county treasury for purposes of holding those funds, which are later distributed. Government code further defines public safety as those funds that are to be used for sheriffs, police, fire protection, county district attorneys, county corrections, and ocean lifeguards. Public safety does not include the courts. Within government code, there is an allocation factor that is set by the auditor controller. Angels Camp receives a percentage allocation of those public safety funds. And then there is a maintenance of effort that we are required to maintain to ensure that if we reduce funding for public safety functions, then our Prop 172 allocation would otherwise be reduced. However, we are well in compliance of the maintenance of effort calculations because we would essentially have to fund those general fund departments far less than what we receive under the public safety augmentation funding. So the funds are allocated by the state controller. We get those monthly. They're calculated September through August. Right now, what we currently do is we deposit those funds into a non-departmental account that is commingled with some other general fund dollars. I need to point out that it is this board's discretion as how to allocate the funding among the public safety services within the county as defined by government code. That's pretty much the gist of it. Included in your agenda packet, I gave you a brief overview of what we have seen our allocation from fiscal years 2010 to the current fiscal year. It's between 1.4, 1.7 million. That number is going to fluctuate, obviously, with growth. It is a sales tax revenue. I can't say that historically we've given it to one public service agency within the county versus another, because again, it goes into this non-departmental fund, and at the end of the day, it's a general fund, it's a general fund, it's a general fund. So it is completely discretionary and up to this board to determine how to allocate those funds, and we're in the neighborhood of 1.6, 1.7 million for 17-18 fiscal year. The one action item I do need, I am recommending that the board take tonight is that direct the auditor controller to establish that public safety augmentation fund, which is required pursuant to government code, that puts us into compliance with that. That creates transparency and accountability for how we're using those funds. And it's your board's discretion to either, you could make a decision tonight and tell us how you want to see that, or our hope is to perhaps maybe bring back more information should you have questions and have further discussions, kind of set this as the framework for discussions during the 17-18 final budget hearings.
Thank you. Questions by the board or by staff? CAO Lutz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could add 2 items to Bonnie's presentation. Thank you, Bonnie, who did a lot of research to pull this together. For clarification on language, the Prop 172 funds do come into our non-discretionary general fund account, or I should say budget unit. They are pulled out on a specific budget line, and for me, it's that fine line on using commingle versus we definitely can identify and separate them out. The question here is based on the statute language. Is it most appropriate to put those in a designated fund, similar to how we would do in law enforcement, AB 443, AB 109, other types of similar types of funds that have come to us? So commingles is a, that can be used in a lot of ways, which is why I wanted to correct the record a little bit. And then secondly, to Bonnie's point, is what I'd be looking for to bring back from this board is there certainly is an opportunity, and a number of our fire districts are represented here, an opportunity to look at the board's intent on a going forward basis for if we're putting that in a designated fund. Does the board want to see that continue would the board want to see that continuing to be allocated essentially 100% to the sheriff's department? Or is there an opportunity where the board would like to see a basic funding formula that we could come back to and look at for the final budget?
Thank you. Questions by the board or staff?
I would have a question, is basically how we're going to be dividing the funds up, because like the occupancy tax that we have right now, it goes a third to the sheriff, a third to roads, and a third to general funds. But yet, if there's a heart attack or something, the fire department responds to it, and their services are being sold, and they're not being reimbursed for it. I have a problem how we divide it up. I like the people that does the service get the money. Another example would be like on our lakes. We signed a contract just recently with Hogan's. The sheriff has a contract with them for services being paid, but just several weeks ago, Consolidated responded to a fight and a toddler being ran over. That was all free services that was sold by the campgrounds. They were sold. They're selling the fires services, but they're not being reimbursed for it. So I have a real problem how the people that's providing the service aren't being reimbursed for those services they're supplying. So I would really be interested to make sure that the people that provide the service are the ones getting paid.
Thank you. Supervisor Mills.
Yes, I would agree with with C.O. Lutz on this particular point is that having it as a designated fund like AB 109 or AB 443 more properly characterizes what it's to be used for, and it has specific uses. Those are delineated. So throwing it into the general fund and then pulling it back out again, even though we can account for it as a line item expenditure, still creates some issues as to how it's allocated in the general ledger. And I fully agree with the point. I think this might also be an opportunity for the board to take a look at the percentages of funding allocations to our various services that we're going to be providing, or we have an option to provide under this particular ERAF. So I think that can be a continuing discussion at a later point, but the initial discussion to bring this into a augmentation fund of its own and have it as a designated fund is a great move. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gurman.
I agree with Supervisor Mills and CEO Lutz that putting this in a designated fund is, it's what we're required to do. We should do it. It's going to make it easier to account for. I look forward to the comments by the chiefs as to what their needs are as well. And certainly public safety is far more than the sheriff. I don't want to approach this as a zero-sum game. We're taking from one person to give to another, and the first person loses. So I look forward to hearing what the chiefs have to say, and I'm sure I'll have further comments.
Supervisor Tofinelli.
Yes, I'm in agreement with the other supervisor that spoke up. I think we definitely need to put this into a specific fund so we can account for the funding where it goes, and much easier. And I'm open to hear what the fire chiefs have to say and having a conversation.
Thank you, sir. I agree with my fellow supervisors. The establishment of this fund is not only dictated by state law, but it makes our accounting measures a lot easier. And I also want to hear from the fire chiefs and the districts. I'm more interested also in the actual needs of police, fire, sheriff's department, and arriving at a good formula as stated by our CIO Lutz to make that happen. Any further comments by board or staff? Ms. Callan?
Hi, Rebecca Callan, Auditor Controller. I would just like to thank CIO Lutz. I've been trying to get this in front of the board since I took office in 2011. So this was the first CIO that has agreed with me on setting up the fund. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Callan. Hey, first time for everything. Is there any further staff comment? At this time, we'll open it up to public comment. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Jason Robitel. I'm the fire chief of Calaveras Consolidated Fire. And I want to just echo what Rebecca just said. Several years ago, the fire chiefs in our association meeting were discussing Prop 172. This came in effect when I was in Toyon Middle School, so I wasn't that familiar. I had to go back and brushing up. But in our conversation and our research, we noticed that since 1993, the county has received $33,164,637.52. And the conversation was, what portion goes to fire? In 2000, when the county kind of washed their hands of the fire service and tossed the keys of the fire engines back to the districts, it's our responsibility to provide that service. And what we've seen is a lot of not only Prop 172, it was not being channeled to fire prevention or fire suppression services. You look at the commercial, and I went back to 1993 and looked at the commercial, and it was passed on, 14 shots of firefighters putting out fire and maybe 4 towards law enforcement. So we feel like, we do have some skin in the game, and again, we brought it up to the CAOs in the past. We're not here for history lessons, but I'm so thankful for Mr. Lutz and having this conversation, giving us the opportunity at least to have a speaking point on moving forward. And Supervisor Clapp touched on a couple points already with the TOT. We want apportionments. I mean, there's a punch list, but I'm not here to go down those roads. But as far as having the conversation, what it will take to help us and to channel some of those funds to their intended use to fire suppression, we are all, we're stretched. I mean, there's some districts, I have to rely on fundraisers to provide service. And I know that there's funds available. We want to have the conversation. Again, let's work together, and we're eager and excited about the opportunity. A couple of our fire chiefs, again, have not been here. We are in consensus. Some are putting together deployments, but it's so good to have all of us on the same page and moving forward, and we're excited about what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
We want to save the best for last, so.
Good evening, Chief Johnson.
Good evening, Mike Johnson, Fire Chief, Ebbets Pass Fire District, supervisors and admin. It's great to be here, and what a terrific topic. And thanks for, from our agency for having having that courage to look at Proposition 172. I know from being a fire service representative, Prop 172 funds are critical to making things happen for your local government fire service. Since, I would have to say, 2006, our particular agency up there, to look at some of the struggles, we're starting to reach that property tax value here this year, what we saw in 2006. In the past 10 years, we've done everything we can to maintain services, and what that's meant is, finding any way to maintain that service by streamlining every possible revenue source, every possible expenditures. Meanwhile, the industry cost of employment is simply outpacing what we have coming into the fire service. So we've done everything we can as your local group, so there's no break in that service. Something like Prop 172 could help reinfuse and put back online things such as capital outlays that have been put on hold for the past 10 years. We're driving fire trucks that are 25 years old in my organization, and we haven't bought a new piece of equipment in many, many years, just to try to maintain some of those, that revenue line versus what's going out. Just echoing all the sentiment of, what Chief Robitel mentioned, and some on the behalf of the association as well, is as a group, as a whole, I don't believe I'm too far out of line to say that, hey, we're excited at the possibility of your group looking at what could possibly be in store for the fire service in Calaveras County through Proposition 172 funds. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief.
Hi, I'm Joel Schwartz from the Copperopolis Fire District, and I'm the administrative officer. Since 2012, call volume in our district has increased 42%, and so far this year, call volume is heading for a record 661 calls and is already up 41%. It's important to note that the majority of this increase is coming from medical calls. 71% of all of our calls are medical. Our revenue has not kept pace with the increased call volume, and overall, our revenue has only increased 9% since 2012, compared to a 42% increase in call volume. The increase in call volume, they're making increased demands on equipment and personnel, particularly the medical calls. Last year, we had to purchase a new ambulance because the maintenance and parts on our unit was excessive. It was cheaper to get rid of it and buy a new one than it was to keep the old one running. This year, we hired 3 additional interns and added another paramedic to one of our shifts to meet the demand. And the only reason we were able to afford to do that is because last year we generated a little over $300,000 in Code 5 revenue because of all the fires our strike teams went on. So far this year, it only looks like about $60,000 is what we'll generate. And that's because it's not a terrible fire season for us. That's a sad way to have to generate revenue. Tax revenue in 2013 actually went down $38,000. For 2017, we're looking at a $9,000 increase. What is the impact of all of this on our department? Unpredictable and marginal tax increases are quickly outpaced by increasing fixed costs for essential services, workers' compensation, health benefits, liability insurance, retirement funds, general maintenance, and equipment repairs. Due to years of stagnant budget growth, we've deferred maintenance on our fire station, which is over 50 years old. Maintenance on our fleet of engines run on baseline levels. They're in service for over 20 years and are approaching the end of their life cycle. With increased service demands, 2017 currently running 46% ahead of last year at this time, our ability to maintain the current level of protection and service we provide our community is in jeopardy unless we can find additional sources of revenue. And I just want to hand these out. This is just supporting detail with some simple charts to show you the growth and increase in call volume versus revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Don Young, San Andreas Fire Protection District.
Welcome, Chief.
Pardon?
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. I'm the longest sitting chief in the Calaveras County Fire Chiefs Organization right now. I'm not the eldest, but I'm the longest sitting. Been 20 years. Most folks don't recognize the fact that the San Andreas Fire Protection District is predominantly run by volunteers. The men and women that currently cover our shifts, our station right now in San Andreas 24/7, 365 days a year, are being paid $50 for a 24-hour shift. Most of these people use this as a stepping stone for education, things along that line. It goes nice on a resume when they get to put some paperwork down that states that they've worked at a fire station. In the last 2 months, San Andreas Fire has responded to over 100 calls the last 2 months. This month's not even over with yet. And we've never in history had that. Average, we get anywhere from 800 to 1,100. In the last 2 years have been over 1,000 calls a year. And we're getting our tails handed to us. Now, I'm very fortunate. These gentlemen didn't want me to tell you about the brand new shiny engine that's sitting in my bay, because it might look as if we're sitting on a cache of monies, but that's not the case. I'm very fortunate that I've got a gentleman that works for me in my office that's quite the word man, and between he and I, we were able to put together a grant through FEMA and got a $700,000 engine, of which we only had to pay 35% or 30%. With that being said, I beg your pardon, 5%, $32,000. We need help. We can't keep doing it. I provide services to all the government buildings here in Calaveras County. We have a fee for construction that we've had in place for a few years to kind of help offset things. When the new courthouse, the new sheriff's building, CCWD, when all these buildings, San Andreas Sanitary District, they were exempt from having to pay that fee to to the Fire Protection District itself. So anything that you folks can do to help us will be greatly appreciated and will not go unnoticed, I can assure you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any further presenters from staff, public safety? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Any questions, any comments by board or staff?
Well, it's almost
Supervisor Mills.
It's almost as though I need to recuse myself. Back in 1993, I was in Steckle Park and Topanga Canyon when that was going on. So it's a very personal issue. And to Mr. Schwartz, you know I'm on your agenda every month and very, very aware of your situation down there. The situation of turnouts, gentlemen. Difficulty and the expense of getting turnouts. You're constantly fighting for SCBA bottles that are current. It's the little things that make the difference. And you can talk about the capital outlay, but you know, I think that the board needs to really have a serious look at the formula that is being put together on Prop 172 and saying, how do we equally support all of the emergency services in the county and do so fairly, so that everybody has an equal shot, so you know what's coming, and it's not all over the map, so to speak, to where you're struggling to look for grants. How many grants do you look for, Joel? Constantly. And literally hundreds. You're thumbing through them every day, trying to find money, and that's part of the problem. Is that instead of concentrating on some of what I call the basic service needs, you're concentrating on always finding money, and it literally derails you from your service component of how you're taking care of your public. Another thing in the Lake Tulloch area, as you well know, how much does Tridam help you to support your work down there in providing safety? Could you come to the microphone? Come to the microphone, please.
Our operational plan for servicing Lake Tulloch is to commandeer a boat if there's a problem.
So in other words, there's no money that's being provided to you by Tridam to help you to take care of whether even sometimes you head to the other side of the lake, do you not?
Yep.
And you're hauling people down off the sides of cliffs.
Correct.
And dragging them.
Correct.
In a boat.
Correct.
And you're getting nothing for it.
Correct.
So
and
it
that's
isn't,
only if we can commandeer a boat.
yeah, so it isn't just a Lake Hogan problem, it's a Lake Tulloch problem, it's generally throughout the system.
Correct.
And that we need to find those ways to augment what you're doing as well to give you a fair shot.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just wanted to bring it out that I may be a little biased here, but I think it's a good bias, and I think it will result in a good discussion if we can actually get to a discussion about what that formula looks like.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Clapp?
Oh, yeah, I agree with Dennis, because it's not just Hogan's, it's all our lakes. It's our campgrounds, it's people that selling their service and not paying for it. And they need to be reimbursed, because we charge them for the sheriff, you know, on it, because I know Maloney's came up, Hogan's came up, East Bay Mud does, but no one pays the fire department. And I'd like to see that changed.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Chief?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I also think you have to reposition the way you think of the fire department, because so much of our business is really medical and medical intervention. And we're the first call that many people in our community make, because they can't afford a doctor, they can't afford to go to the hospital, they don't have transportation to go to the emergency room. And because so much of our business is really medical aid, just saying fire isn't good enough anymore. It's really consuming an inordinate amount of our personnel, our time, and our budgets. And you have to relook at the way you evaluate the role the fire department plays in the community, because it's more than just putting out fires.
Thank you, Chief. Supervisor Garamendi?
Like Supervisor Mills, I'm biased. I have 4 fire departments in my district, and they are the anchors of our community members. And we all went through the Butte Fire together. All these departments were there, and I appreciate everything that you guys do. as you're aware, we are in a interesting budget time insofar as we have some funds from Measure C. We may not have those in the future, so we have to think about things, unfortunately, short-term, but we need to build this long-term process between the county and our fire districts. I don't know if there's a designated hitter there for you guys, but what if the county had money? What do you have in mind? Is there a process that you'd want to distribute it? Is there a centralized resource that the county could fund? How can we help you guys with funding? So, Chief?
Again, my name's Jason Robitel, Fire Chief, Calaveras Consolidated Fire. We have, like we said, we've been working together. We've had a workshop where we've developed a strategic plan that has hit so many points on staffing. First of all, when an alarm comes off, we want staffing, designated staffing. I personally have lost my 24th firefighter to a career department just last month. Recruitment, retention, it's about $6,000. Again, it's just that movie Groundhog Day, when you train them up and you start over, that's our life. So again, I'm not speak for the whole group. This is a very dynamic conversation. Each need is different amongst our fire districts. Some have special fees, some don't. Some need staffing. Some have delayed capital improvement plans. So that's a very in-depth conversation. So for me to give you just an answer, but I mean, I think when it comes to staffing, our recruitment or retention, that's paramount.
I think what I understand, and yeah, I mean, you guys provide a lot of training for our youth, and they go get great jobs out of the county. But I wanted to, if there's, when we think about this, I mean, we've got so many fire districts. If we were able to come up with funding, distributing it, what would be an effective manner? I know that's in depth. Are there resources that we could help fund, be it training or clerical, or how can we really make an impact on what you guys do day to day?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my constituents would agree. Are we talking one-time costs, like you said, are these extraordinary expenditures, or are these going to be reoccurring costs? Reoccurring, in my philosophy in budgeting, those we apply to personnel that are reoccurring. We're talking, hey, we have a stack of money, and there's some deferred maintenance, there's some apparatus, there's some facilities, infrastructure, communication that we would probably look at. So again, just we wanted to spark the conversation, but I think it wouldn't take much to get you those answers if we have some dollar amounts to work off of.
Right. Well, I mean, you guys certainly get together, you work together, you all seem to like each other. I think it would be...
Yeah, and that comes in waves too. So now's the time we all like each other.
But I mean, as you guys, I know from my seat, if there was a consolidated ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's my ROP teacher there in high school.
Both of you got to respond to my house. So I like all the chiefs, but but if there was, as you guys have this conversation, and I think, depending on where this board wants to go, that would certainly make it more efficient for us, because we don't know what tomorrow is.
Absolutely.
But certainly we know what today is, and we just need to start digging through this.
Conversation, yes. Thank you.
Well, Jason, you and I have had conversations on this. And I think it's important, when we get to final budget time, I think that's what we're talking about here, that you guys get together and you come forward and make a presentation of final budget to this board and what you guys would like to see, whether it's just funds designated to you for you to spend how you want, there's something we can do for you, how you guys would, as a consensus for each one of your departments, if it's different, then make the presentation to us so we understand where you're going and what you want done.
Yes, sir.
Yes, at final budget time for us.
I agree with Supervisor Toffenali, because if it's department by department, we're going to get in a big fist fight protecting our turf up here. And it'd be a lot easier if you guys...
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, as president of the Chiefs Association, what I'll do at the next Chiefs meeting, which, by the way, gentlemen, is the second Wednesday of each month, and you're all welcome, I'll get together with my fellow fire chiefs, and we'll formulate a committee, and I can assure you that Mr. Robitel will be primary in it, because in all sincerity, and I'll say it in front of everybody, you've done a real good job. Thank you. All right, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, further comments by the board? Chief, I've been to your meetings, as you know.
Yes, you have.
So, and I think that I agree with Supervisor Toffenali that maybe the chiefs need to hash out what this looks like, what that formula might look like, and bring it back to the board so we can have that complete discussion so that you folks have worked out the details internally within your organizations as to what's important, what's priority, and then we can look at how we can start to fill those needs and backfill those needs. And then also be thinking more in the longer range of if we can sustain, what would that sustainable piece look like, so that you can start to plan in the longer ranges of 2 to 5 years rather than just this year.
Is there a deadline when you need that by?
Tomorrow.
You didn't get it yet?
Thank you, Supervisor.
Nothing, the messenger showed up?
I have a couple of comments. Being from public safety on the other side of that fence, if you will, on law enforcement, I see the need. I'm more concerned that if we establish a funding revenue or an avenue, that we maintain that, not just a one-time shot. I think this particular program is going to be able to start us on that journey. And once again, putting the finances where we need to have those. But I have another concern, is that I don't know if the public is fully aware or educated to the point on how important our fire service is to them. I'm very fortunate. In my district, we have Ebbets Pass Fire. They do a very fine job, but there's also a special tax that's funding that. I would like to see, not only in this funding revenue, and I know we've tried that in some of the districts and it's failed, but I would like the public to take another look at that. Look what's happening around us, folks. We went through a very serious fire here 3 years ago. It wasn't our first rodeo. Look at our counties around us right now, what's happening this very day, this very minute. Public needs to understand. Public service costs, and we need to protect ourselves by providing for public service and for public safety. I am in agreement with all my supervisors here. I would support this program wholeheartedly. And once again, let's take a look and see where we really need to put these funds. Okay? That's all I have to say.
If I might add, Mr. Chair, you know, as your committee comes together and you guys start coming with the ideas, you should probably sit down with CAO Lutz and hammer out, because he's going to be recommending on budgets and stuff like that. Obviously, we want to give you every nickel we possibly could, but we also have our constraints as well. So if you know, as you come up, it's coordinated, it'll be good. Thank you.
Okay. Any further public comment? Mr. Segala.
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. I really think we got wonderful fire protection in our county, and we had for a long time. And it seems like what's happening here is kind of like trying to figure out a budget, and there's discussion of capital improvements. Capital improvements are like replacing a fire truck or any other equipment that needs replacing. Well, this may sound real simple, but it's usually a good idea to plan for the future. If you plan for the future, you don't have a sudden experience, hey, the car don't work anymore, it's too old. You already have money set aside for depreciation that it will be in your capital fund. Now that assumes that you control what's happening in the county. To a certain extent, the control has shifted to the state. So also to a certain extent, you depend on grant money coming from the state politicians. And so it gets pretty sticky. It still makes sense to me to plan your operations in such a way that you have funds set aside to replace, in your capital improvements, to replace equipment as it wears out. So that shouldn't be a sudden issue. Also, this is not just about fire. According to what I read here, is this public safety involves other things besides fire. There's also law enforcement. I think there's also the jails. They're not the judges. They're not included. I don't know why, but they're not. So what a, this is a tremendous planning challenge. Not only do you need to consider what the fire department needs from these funds, but also the other departments, which is sometimes just as valuable and just as important for public safety. Have you ever noticed what happens when there's a medical emergency? I did. And my mother-in-law, who since passed away, had a medical emergency, and we needed somebody to help. And what happened was this huge truck came, lights flashing. It seemed like an army of people all coming in the home. Who are all these people? What are they doing? And I said, oh, God, what a waste of money. All we needed is one person. And I talked to some people in that business. Oh, too bad. I could give you the reply. I think they're going to reply.
Thank you. Mr. Stopper?
SIRS District 5. First, I want to thank you for opening up this conversation beyond the agenda item more. This is one of the healthiest conversations I've seen this year between the fire chiefs and you. These are services we need. Mr. Robotel worked with his fire crew last year to put through a special tax. Unfortunately, it wasn't passed because public safety is a big issue. We have problems with the respond time of the ambulances. Our guys are there prior, and their hands are tied in the services they can provide to the people that are literally at their moment. Now, to the agenda item. Direct the auditor controller to create a public safety augmentation fund in the county treasury to receive the Prop 172 funds allocated to the county. Direct staff to bring the matter back for further discussion during the September 2017-2018 final budget hearings. I want to thank Lutz for bringing this forward. It provides clarity. We know where these funds are going. They're restricted. And that provides a course where people don't ask if things are being commingled in the future. We're separating ourselves. We need to think about other funds, the special tax funds, the special districts. From what I understand, many of those funds are put into the teeter fund. Now, the teeter fund's constantly being used to supplement general fund and other things. This is another fund that floats back and forth. Now, you can track it and everything, but you should also think about making another line item, especially when it comes to special taxes, so that those fire departments know that their money's being protected when it comes to the special taxes in their districts. Just some food for thought as we move forward in the future. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Mr. Edson?
It's great that 172 is being brought forward for clarity. We never were able to get that before, and thank you, Mr. Lutz, for doing this. But I think that you guys are all up here talking about how these guys are going to get this bonus, and it sounds like it anyhow. It sounds good. But you know what? You're going to rob Peter to pay Paul on 172. There's only so much money in it. It's being used, all of it, right now. Somebody's using it. Of course, we don't know exactly who is using it, but somebody's using it up, and for it to be redistributed, which means somebody else is going to lose out somewhere. So I think we should talk about how we can move into the future and make sure that our fire services are provided what they need for the services they're providing. As you heard one of the chiefs say from Copper, a lot of their calls now are medical. We got an aged population in the county, and a lot of calls are medical, and we've had a lot of fires this year too, in the past couple of years actually. So I know that when the alarm goes off and you hear the sirens, it's usually either medical or fire. Probably 9 times out of 10, I would imagine. And these guys are responding to it each and every time. They're the ones that are out there in the storms, in the floods, the fires, when the electrical lines go down. They're out there directing traffic. I got in an accident on Highway 12, and fire was first. Fire was first, right there. And they responded as quickly as they can, and they do what they can. Great to be able to enhance them if we can. I think that we have the ability right now. This board's going to make a choice, I believe, to be able to grant that ability to be able to make a better and healthier fire district, or get it right back into the 172 sharing thing and take one from the other. That's what it's going to come down to. Yeah, so think long and hard about where you're going to get that money from. I think actually right now you're sitting on a pile of money, and you're welcome for being able to sit on that pile of money.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Good evening, Elizabeth.
Good evening. Elizabeth Thompson, Common Ground Senior Services. And I just want to go out to these guys because during the winter times and during times where trees fall down the road and we can't get to our Meals on Wheels client, or we're worried about them because the power line is down, we just have to make a phone call directly to the fire chief in the different districts. And in Arnold, several times they would have to deliver meals for us because we can't get up there because we don't have four-wheel drive, or the roads are just so bad, and they're able to provide that service. The services that you talk about that people really don't know above and beyond what, we know as firefighters, or what firefighter services do. But for the safety of the elderly, definitely, and for the safety of being able to access roads and with the equipment that they do have is vital to, again, our aging population that lives in areas that are very difficult, Sheep Ranch, Railroad Flat, those type areas. So thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Callan.
Hello. I just wanted to correct something. Mr. Stopper had mentioned something about Teeter and special taxes going into Teeter. That doesn't happen. Teeter is a funding mechanism to basically pre-fund taxes. So any special districts or any taxing jurisdiction that has a direct charge or a special assessment, it's treated no differently than the property taxes, the 1%. If it's not paid by the property owner, Teeter goes ahead and funds that district, whatever those dollars are. And then any of penalties or interest associated with non-payment goes into Teeter. That's how the balance of Teeter has been created. It's the penalties and interest associated with non-payment. But all of the districts get 100% of whatever charge special assessments or direct charges that are on. And then I've heard several times that we're sitting on a pile of money. I want to remind you that we're in recovery for Butte Fire. I looked today to try to ascertain exactly how much money we're out that we've claimed, that we're waiting to get back, that we've been notified that FEMA is going to pay or Cal OES is going to pay. Basically, the county has expended over $10 million related to Butte Fire, and we've received to date, physically received $2.9 million. So we are not sitting on a pile of money. It's sitting with the state of California and the federal government. And I'm certain at some point we'll get it. I just don't know what that length of time is going to be. I did establish 2 receivables, one for $1.5 million related to federal funds and a $391,000 receivable related to state funds, both related to Butte Fire. But that's all that we've been notified that the Public Assistance Grant and California Disaster Assistance Act grant is going to pay at this point. So that's a total of a little over $4 million. So $10 million we've spent. We're looking at about $4 million that has definitely been signed off on. So easy math is I'm still waiting on several millions of dollars. So it will get it at some point. I'm hoping this next fiscal year, but in the meantime, we're skimming across cash flow.
Thank you. Further comments by the public?
I once was a volunteer fireman at the Ebbets Pass Fire District, and my son was 2 years old and he was found in a pond, and if it wasn't for the volunteer fire people who rescued him and took him to the hospital here in San Andreas, plus the fact that the doctor that was on call was a pediatrician, he probably wouldn't be 36 years old today. So I have a real affection for the Ebbets Pass Fire Department, number one, and my service to that department. And anything anybody can do to support the fire service is, I'm wholly in favor of that happening. So whatever you can do as a board, I would really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Trevor Whitkey, District 2, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. We too would like to express our support for anything that the county is able to do to support public safety in the county and to support our local fire districts. I grew up in Moke Hill. The volunteer fire department there is really the core of our community. Every 4th of July, the volunteer fire department is out there leading the parade and is on a daily basis keeping all of us safe. My neighbor is actually, my in-law's neighbor is the chief in Moke Hill, and I see him going out on a regular basis. At the middle of the night, he's out looking to protect the community. And so it's vital that we maintain all these services and do everything that we can. As Measure C funds were brought up and the availability of cash, we do know that $7.2 million was brought in as a result of Measure C funds in the first installment, and we also know that any way that we can keep government afloat, particularly if we have cash flow problems, is vitally important. And so if we're already having cash flow problems right now, these problems are only going to get magnified down as we go further along. So bringing in this next batch of $7.2 million and getting $14.4 million total for the year is absolutely vital and will be essential to maintaining key services like this, I believe. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Mr. McManus?
Bill McManus. I live in District 3 and have been living in the Ebbets Pass Fire District for a long time. And I am an informed person about fire departments and how they work. I've lived there for a long time. I would recommend that people not look to Proposition 172 or taxing criminal enterprises or coming up with any other kind of whiz-bang methods of raising money. We have a tax in our district. I see it on my tax bill every year. It's not excessive. It's actually a great deal. And all you have to do is, if I have to take an ambulance one time, which thankfully I haven't, it pays for the taxes. Someone needs to explain to the people, the constituents out there, that if you rely on government, you will be disappointed. If you believe the campaign promises, you will be disappointed eventually. Depend on yourself. Go ahead and vote for the taxes. It comes out of your pocket, you're paying it, it's going to be there, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. No matter what happens with the complexion of the board, or if the board becomes fickle about one thing or another, your fire protection is going to be safe. You are paying for it. And any district that wants to do it, I would look to Ebbets Pass Fire to see how they've educated the people up there. We are, it's crazy to say when you want to pay taxes, And people in Ebbets Pass Fire District almost enjoy paying that fire tax. The service is so terrific, and it's such a good deal. And we don't have to wait or rely on San Andreas to do anything for us. We've taken care of it ourselves, thanks to our fire district. So I encourage all the fire districts to do that. Encourage your voters. Let them know what is possible, and let them take their fire protection back into their hands and control it, and they'll be much happier. And we won't be looking for funds all over the place to squeeze by here or start something else there. It'll be a sustainable fund for all the fire departments. So I hope they can do that, and I'm sure the people at Ebbets Pass Fire District would love to help out in how to educate the people and get a tax measure on the ballot to pay for your fire protection. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion, deliberation? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Supervisor Mills, seconded by Supervisor Garamendi. No further public comment. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0, unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 13 is from the Administrative Office to authorize the process to relinquish the Calaveras County Transit Program back to the Calaveras Council of Governments and designate elected and county staff to serve as liaisons with the COG to outline a transition strategy and bring recommendations back to both boards.
All right. This item again is.
Supervisor, I'm sorry. CAO Lutz, you're presenting?
Yes. Just for a brief summary, really trying to allow this to be more of a discussion point. As we know, Public Works has operated the transit system for Calaveras County for a little over a decade now. And as the board is also aware, we've particularly over the last few years had some pretty significant issues on fare box recovery, challenges with the routes within the system, losing ridership. And with that, then we've had to make adjustments structurally to try and bring that fare box ratio back into compliance. At the same time, it's resulted in cutting off or ending some routes that were lower performing or higher cost. Most recently, the board took action to eliminate the route over to Delta College being an example. And we're really at that point where continuing to operate the system as we have, we're just whittling away pieces of it and really are needing to look at a different way of operating and running that program. We're also at a point where we are having the current transit manager who is retiring next month. And we also are in process of developing and putting out the RFP to solicit a new transit operator. All of these factors make it a good point for us to really look at our current structure where those opportunities present themselves and ask, are there different ways that we might want to operate the system? Are there structural shifts that we need to make to really have a more vital, or I guess a more robust transit operation within the county? What we're then bringing to the board is an item to really weigh that input, explore the possibility that maybe Public Works, the county itself, is not the best operator for transit. Maybe we should return that program to the Council of Governments, or at least begin that process and have that discussion whether Council of Governments wants to assume that. And so what, and again, I believe there are Council of Government staff in attendance as well to be able to provide some input. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to at least look at this, and then if the board wishes it, establish a transition committee to then work on the financial aspect of handing it back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Is there any presenters from Public Works or COG who'd like to speak?
Good evening, Supervisors. Amber Collins with the Calaveras Council of Governments. My comments will be pretty brief here unless you have additional questions for me. But really, I'm just here to support the county and what's in the best interest of our member jurisdictions. The COG really serves as a resource for our member agencies to accomplish your goals and priorities. So I'm happy to work with the county on a transition plan. And one that will involve both the city and county, which are our member agencies. And then also, if the county does decide to move forward in this direction, I'd be happy to bring this discussion to my COG board and any subsequent action items to kind of move this process forward. Thank you.
Questions of COG representative?
Yeah, please don't run away. So COG has had this transit before. And how did it end up, what is the history that it got from COG and was put back into the county's purview?
Well, that is a complicated question and one I don't think I was prepared to answer. It
sorry.
is my understanding that in the history it was with the COG. I don't understand the nuances as to why it came over to the county Department of Public Works, but the COG is a joint powers agency between the city and counties, so really we work at the pleasure of our member agencies, and I think at that time the county and city decided it was in their best interest to presume services. And
Yeah, it wasn't intended to be a loaded question because I don't know the answer either.
Right.
It's just understanding that history of how that occurred, so we don't repeat that somewhere in the future. And the transition team, if that's what's going to happen, would try to understand that as well as part of the process.
Okay.
Thanks.
I've got a real, there's no dumb questions. You realize that according to our board packet and previous meetings that public transit in Calaveras County is somewhat of a losing proposition. Would you agree with that? If you do,
would disagree.
why would you want to take this on? I've got to be honest.
Is that the question?
That's the question.
I think,
Yeah.
I would disagree it's a losing proposition. I think we all agree, and, there's no secret that we've had discussions at the COG board in terms of transit's performance recently in the past several years. I think that, transit is a very critical need of this county. And I think something like this is definitely an opportunity to bring the city to the table and then, have a forum for transit that is its own, board and forum for people to come and address transit issues.
Okay, so you're willing to take on a system that is costing money? And do you have a secret formula, or do you have any ideas how you're going to improve that situation? And if you do, I can't wait to see those, but let's, for instance, I hate using this scenario. What happens 2 years down the road when we're right back in the same spot we are, where it's still not making the fare, we're still in a problem financially with it? What happens then? Do we just stop public service? That's a question not necessarily for you,
Okay.
maybe for our community. And how important is public transit to this community?
Was that the
You're up.
question? Well, I think there's definitely opportunity here to identify cost efficiencies. Transit's always been a difficult service to run, especially in a rural area, definitely costly. But I think in the right organization that has expertise in this field and ability to address maybe some innovations and kind of changing of the times and looking at technologies and ways that we can take advantage of some changes in the world to better serve our constituents. I think there's opportunities.
And you can run this out of the COG Board of Directors?
Well, I
You've already
think-
discussed it, or you're going to discuss it? I know we're looking at the possibility. I don't want to nail you down too much, because that's not fair. But I'm sorry if you've got a problem, not you particularly, but if we have a problem with our transit system, we need to find fixes for it. And I'm hoping that COG would have some way to get us out of this mess, if you will, if it's a mess. That's another issue I have. Is it that bad? It appears to be from finance reporting here. Those are some of the questions I would have probably in the future. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no problem. And we're, at the initial stages and definitely here to kind of explore what type of organization this could look like and maybe opportunities for shared staffing resources at the COG agency. So, we're definitely at the initial stages of these conversations. And, like I said, I'm really just here as a resource for our member agencies and what's in the best interest of the county and city.
Okay, thank you, Amber.
And if I might add to echoing Amber's point, this really does represent that first step or a stage of if it's the county's interest to transition this program or at least explore it, then this would be gauging if the board is even wanting to entertain that, and if so, let's develop a committee, start working directly with the COG and have those discussions at both the COG board and this board.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Yeah, and I will defer to my colleagues who serve on the COG board as to their expertise, and they're deep in this. But I do want to make sure I'm clear that one of my only concerns would be that a lot of areas in my district are very underserved and hard to get to, and they're expensive routes, and they're always going to lose money. But providing access to people who have no other means of transportation, especially in one of the poorer areas of this county, is important. And I want to make sure that as you come up with the plan, I understand it has to be bottom line, but it can't be bottom, but we can't abandon certain areas in our community that need access to transit. A lot of people in my community don't have the quarter tank of gas it takes to get down the hill and back. And so I would hope you would take that into consideration. That would be my ongoing concern, but I certainly defer to the members of the board.
Supervisor Mills?
No, I'll defer to Supervisor Tofinelli.
Well, this is just the initial step, as Tim pointed out. This has to go to the COG board, and we have to have a discussion there.
I agree.
It has to go, I think, the formation of a committee to put the whole thing together is in line. I think it needs to be played out that way, and between both boards, reporting to COG board and reporting back to this board on steps and the plan to transition it. It's just not going to say, okay, here's the line, cut it today, tomorrow it's over at COG, and that's done. It's just not going to transition that way. As far as public transportation, and county council can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're mandated to provide some type of public transportation, so it's not going to go away. It's just not going to disappear. So we receive funding for it. But again, this is just the initial step to go forward. And I see the city's here, member of the COG from the city. Perhaps she has or wants to chime in on this.
Well, that's what I was going to ask the chair, if we would recognize the Vice Mayor of the City of Angels Camp and also a member of COG, that we could get her input.
I most certainly do, and welcome. Good evening. How you been, Amanda?
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Amanda Follendorf, Vice Mayor of Angels Camp, and the city supports the changeover to COG. Both Mills and Tofinelli have touched on mandates. The mandates don't only affect you, it also affects the city. So with these reporting not matching, what our funding is in effect. And we are in the same place you guys are, struggling, trying to come up with creative ideas to help alleviate some of the issues that have gone on for the last couple of years. And we think this is the best avenue, and the city supports it 100%. And we are willing to work with both the county, the COG, as a member entity of in this partnership to see that this is a smooth transition.
Thank you, and I'd like to, as chair, I'd like to officially recognize Mayor, and we sit on several committees together. Thank you for coming this evening. Is there any other comment? Well, actually, I think I'd like to hear from Public Works staff while we're on staff. Is there any comment by Public Works in this matter? Then we'll go to public comment.
I'd like to say something though too.
I'm sorry.
I said I would have a comment before we go to public comment.
Okay, when we have staff, we'll go to that. Supervisor Cloud. Mr. Krovitz.
Public Works supports whatever is in the best interest of transit and the transit public that we serve. And if this process, which is not overly defined here, gets us to that goal, we're going to support it and we're going to do what's asked of us. The idea was floated initially in the short-range transit plan, and you can find what the comments were in that short-range transit plan. I'll let you guys ferret that out. It's pretty large. But that's about all Public Works has to say.
Okay.
This was presented to me a week ago. Any questions?
Questions of Mr. Krovitz? Seeing none. Supervisor Clapp, you had a comment?
Yeah, my statement would be, I represent District 5. District 5 has no public transit in it. They just did an intersection with Caltrans, and they didn't even put handicap accessible, so I'm completely blocked off. I don't know how Caltrans got away with what they did, but it's not ADA approved, and so I can't even get transit. So you have transit, but District 5 has none.
Further comments before public comment? Public comment? Mr. Edson.
So, right across the road from District 5, there is a bus stop. It's there for District 5. And we put it there. And it is handicap accessible. So, they put it into a private property because we couldn't find a place to put it on the road anywhere because of the improvements. And so, you know, actually I took the bus ride from that when they opened it up. Works fine. It's right there at Vista Largo and 26. You know, this has been a takeover for quite a while. COG and Angel's been trying to get a hold of transit for quite a while. There's a lot of money involved in it somewhere. And we're going to give it to them. We're going to give money away for something that can't be managed any better from anybody else because of the situation in the county. Transit is a difficult proposition in this county, no matter what. No matter what. And so by creating one person doing it right now, and the funding that comes into the county, what is it, 1.2 million or something like that for transit, you're not going to keep that here. It's going to go away, and it's going to create another agency somewhere else that's going to cost more, but it's going to keep funding going to that agency. So I think you guys ought to think about this. Take a look at the numbers, make get real on it, and realize that Deborah, who ran transit all these years, did everything possible to make it run as efficiently and as good as possible. And if you want to be partners, they could have been partners with her and helped her out. And there was a constant resistance from COG. So there's a lot more to it than just what we're hearing right here. And it's very convoluted. So the other thing is wasn't there an issue recently about an audit of COG? You know, I mean, are we going to consider that as well? So, I don't know. I just am not in favor of creating something bigger when we have shrunk it down as much as we could to make it run as efficiently as possible. Even though it is not a moneymaker, it will never be a moneymaker. I don't care who you hand it to. It will never be a moneymaker. The difference is where does that money go? And some people are willing to give it to another part of the county.
Thank you, sir.
Chair, I'd like to address one of the erroneous statements that Mr. Edson made, is do we do at the intersection that it's not handicap accessible. There's no crosswalk that goes to the Tofanelli's district, and it's just common for the erroneous statements that the gentleman constantly makes. Okay. Thank you.
Noted. Any further public speakers?
Good evening. We would like to enter this for the record. Is that okay? Can I hand this to
Is it on the agenda item, ma'am?
Yes, it's regarding Agenda 13, COG.
Okay. If you hand it to the clerk, please.
Vivian Seichu, District 1. We would like to begin from an abstract of an email written by one of our supervisors, which reads, "People only want to see their government working together for a common goal of keeping them safe, and this is not the way to do that. Elections have consequences. As you know, the state has notified the county of an audit that will go back 10 years. That by itself should have people on their toes. I can speak to some of this privately. As you recall, the COG audit was very disheartening. And keep in mind, the books were being handled by our auditor. They even said the problem was going on for years. That issue has been corrected with the addition of a bookkeeper at COG. The fact of the matter is that overall, the county cannot fix its broken finance system that easily, gentlemen, and yet keeps having problems with it. Simply adding a bookkeeper at COG does not solve the problem, which has been allowed to fester for years. The issue is not with short staffing, but rather with process quality and competency levels, and perhaps also with ethical value standards. As we all well know by now, the county struggles with commingling, cash flow and cost management, prompt reimbursement claims, and priority use of restricted fund balances. The auditor controller's credibility, along with the county's, would be greatly diminished by a state audit. They would tear the whole fiscal operation apart in a matter of days, to also include COG. Highly experienced and trained fiscal professionals would laugh at the financial system that our county has been operating under for years, which also extends to COG. As elected officials, gentlemen, you and the auditor controller should be our watchdogs, but if we are not mistaken, we have been operating without a single audit order for a very long time. You are the sole responsible parties who know the actuals and who have not once publicly or during budget reviews pointed out any issues or variances. In conclusion, and to dovetail back from where we first started, you are absolutely correct, Mr. Mills. People only want to see their government working together for a common goal, and elections indeed do have consequences. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Hi, guys. Kathy Topol, Common Ground Senior Services. As you know and are well aware, we provide transportation to the disabled, the veterans, and the older adult population. I think that no matter whether this goes back to COG or whether it stays with public transit or with public works, I think what's important is that we start working, and we start working with people on the ground floor. Everybody that has a stake in transportation makes huge salaries, has this huge overhead with it. And I think if we start thinking ground floor, nonprofits, other organizations that can take pieces of this and put it together into the community to make it a whole, I think that's what's really important, and I think we need to keep that in mind. I'd also like to ask that when you do this committee, you have your COG supervisors, but I think you need someone other than a COG supervisor to sit on this board. Because number one, as Supervisor Garamendi mentioned, his district is very underserved. It's very hard to serve his district. I talked to him last week looking for volunteers out there. We get calls on a daily basis for people to get out of West Point, to go to medical appointments. We can't serve them. We don't have the staff, the funds, or the volunteers. So somebody like him who's got people on the ground floor out there, I'd like to see him sit on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Topol. Further public comment?
Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. This is a complex, it's almost like a can of worms. Try to figure out what's best. Usually, if you turn over an enterprise to government, you can expect a loss. Would the loss be greater if the government is further removed from the electorate or even the public? What exactly was the history of operation of the bus service under COG? What were the nature of the problems? Are they the same problems that we have now? Is the problems accounting, keeping track of money? Is the problems not reaching out to potential sources of funding, like the private sector, or even privatization? We know that the non-for-profit groups certainly can have a need for this and can help fund it. Where do we go to get the expert advice? Well, I think before you transfer the operation to COG, you get a hold of somebody that's familiar with this, that understands these systems statewide or even nationally, and see what kind of ideas other districts have done, or even what the private sector has done. Then you get some recommendations that might, who knows, might be able to operate a system at a profit, and maybe not even have government run it. Such things have happened before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scala. Mr. Edson, I believe we only have one time for public speaking.
Sure, but...
Mr. Edson, we're not going to engage in one-to-one, please. Is there any further public speakers?
George Fry. My opinion is that the Public Works ought to continue to operate it, and I do have a suggestion. I really feel for Supervisor Garamendi's district, and maybe the solution is something akin to dial-a-ride, or a very, maybe even something similar to a taxi cab, or that can help those people in that area so that they do get their needs met. There's got to be a solution to that kind of thing without having to run a bus all the way to West Point and Railroad Flat and Wilseyville and what have you. So I would recommend that the county hang on to the transit system.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring the focus back to the agendized item, and that is to form a committee, if you will, don't know what the definition is, to look into the feasibility of turning over the transit system to COG. Am I correct in that, CAO Lutz?
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
I mean, certainly the board has discretion if they want to decide on a committee and what its intended purpose is, but ideally then it would be to explore what that would entail if the board's interested in transitioning transit out of Public Works and back to COG for an as yet undetermined structure.
So as I understand it, we're looking from the board direction to form that committee and do that research, and then that would be discussed in open forum at a meeting again. And at that time, I would have some very serious questions, but that's another time at another meeting for an agendized item, depending on the results of the board's decision tonight. So is there further board discussion? Supervisor Garamendi.
You know, I think our board members who serve on the COG are closest to this, but just to be consistent with what we're doing, we're not voting on a final switch over here, so I might suggest that on item number 13, we eliminate section 1 and just go section, because it's a little ambiguous, authorize the process to relinquish. I get that, but more important, I think, is designated elected and county staff to serve as liaisons with the COG to outline transition strategy and bring recommendations back to both boards. And with that, you know, I would make a motion that we go with that and leave the first sentence out, just because it keeps it clear exactly what we're doing. COG's you guys are gonna figure this out, and we'll talk about it.
I fully understand.
Is that your motion?
But gentlemen, we have a motion on the floor.
I'll second that.
Okay. Let's understand the motion. Motion was made by Supervisor Garamendi regarding agenda item 13 to strike subsection 1 and act on subsection 2. Madam Clerk, could you read what to be stricken and also what we're voting on, please?
If I might, Mr. Chair, can I amend my motion?
Sure, you can amend your motion.
I'll withdraw
It's
my
already got
second.
Hold on a
I'll
minute,
withdraw.
hold on a minute. It's been moved and seconded.
I
Well,
withdraw
you can
my
amend-
second.
You can amend the motion, but you'll have to, do we withdraw the first one? Yeah. We'll have to withdraw the first one, then you'll make a new motion. So, as a mover, would you remove your?
Yes, I removed my second.
Okay, we're in agreement that motion will be removed from the table. Right, counsel?
The second has been removed, so the original motion can be modified, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Garamendi, do you have a motion now?
Thank you. I just want to clarify so we get this all done in one motion.
Okay.
That would designate the members of these two gentlemen who serve on the COG already as the elected, and Mr. Lutz as the county staff to serve as liaisons with the COG to outline transition strategy and bring recommendations back to both boards.
Okay, do we understand the motion?
By what time?
By the time you're ready. Unless you'd like it to.
I just wanted it clear.
I think you guys should take the time to do this correctly.
Okay, all right, we have a motion on the floor.
And I'd second that.
As stated by Supervisor Garamendi, we have a second by Supervisor Clapp. Is there any further board discussion?
Well, only just.
Everybody's got their lights on. I'm just waiting with bated breath.
No, Chair, I was just trying to be sure everybody clearly understood that the vice chair of COG is the at-large member from District 2. So you do have somebody that has voice in your district that is on and he is active, he is engaged, he does understand the COG and the policies and principles that COG operates under. So you have a good representative there, sir.
And he's up in West Point.
And he's up in West Point.
End of the line.
Exactly. So, thank you.
Counsel, you need to speak probably, huh?
I just wanted to clarify, with ad hoc committees, you know, it's limited to solely of the less than a quorum of the body, of the elected, of the legislative body, for a specific purpose, for a limited time. I just wanted to clarify, this is really just an informal committee, not an ad hoc committee, because you're including the CAO to reach out to COG for this purpose. I do think that because you are going to be having two board members participate and it is a limited scope, that it would be wise to have a limited term to it as well, just in an abundance of caution. So it's not it wouldn't rise to a standing issue where potentially you meet every month for, you know, an ongoing period of time. It doesn't sound that there's going to be any kind of set meetings or schedules or anything that would constitute a standing meeting. But for instance, you know, your very broad expectations is the hopes that this group would be able to report back to both COG and this board within 6, 9, 12 months. It can certainly be the outer limits, But that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have not set any time limit on this committee. Is that correct? Am I incorrect?
Correct.
All right. You can amend your motion if you wish. We'll have to withdraw the original. All right. Second was withdrawn by Supervisor Clapp, and Supervisor Garamendi has indicated he's going to withdraw his motion.
See if we get it
Round
right
three.
this time.
Supervisor Garamendi, you have the floor.
All right. Same motion as before with 6 months.
6 months. This is, and just so for clarification, this is a ad hoc committee, standard committee, or a fact-finding unofficial committee, is that correct?
Chair, it can't be an ad hoc simply because we've
Absolutely,
included the
I'm just
CAO.
clarifying. Council, is that correct? Clarity, please.
An ad hoc committee is solely less than a quorum of the legislative body,
Okay.
of the board. So this would be an informal group that is designated to reach out to COG and work with COG to formulate a plan.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Hi, you can speak. How are you, CEO Lutz?
Hi there. Not to complicate things, part of the reason the first component to this item was there is we have an issue on needing to replace the transit manager position. Now, we can try and go the extra hire route in order to see if we can get somebody as a transitional period. And initially, when we were looking at it, and if we were trying to establish a transition plan, we could have made it work. If we're looking at possibly 6 months coming back to the board for recommendation, I would just seek board's guidance first on the RFP that we were doing for the transit operations, whether we continue with the existing operator and hold off on doing that RFP, which would be preferable. It would certainly save staff time and funds until we know what's going to happen. And then the second piece would be looking at, we'll certainly try and do an extra hire position with the goal that we don't know, there's uncertainty there. But really the big piece would be that RFP on the transit operations.
I mean, there's no reason that this committee needs to go 6 months. If they come back to us in 2 weeks, it's fine. They may need 6 months or more.
Please.
You guys are on there, what do you do?
Well, we have a COG meeting in 2 weeks, so we'll discuss it with the COG board at that time. And so, I don't anticipate this taking 6 months at all.
You had a comment?
Yeah, on the extension that we just passed, that was to, what's the deadline on that? Was it a 6 month or a 9 month extension that we did? Jeff, do you know?
I believe it was a
March?
March.
Okay. So it's March is the date, and that gives us that much time to work. I'm just thinking of the broader perspective here.
All right.
Am I wrong?
6 months.
Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. The RFP for a new transit operator for the operation of the transit system, providing the drivers, we extended that till the end of February of 2018. However, there is a required circulation period, a required response period, a period to bring it in front of the board for approval. And so we unfortunately are pushing ahead with that RFP. So there needs to be a certain amount of time built in if we're going to have an operator in place, or if we're going to get directed to negotiate a second extension with our current operator. So we need to, it needs to have a thought out plan.
Okay,
And we need the
thank you.
time.
I just wanted to be sure that was included in this conversation, if everybody understood that timeline.
All right, we have a motion on the table. We have a second on the table.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Krobitz. Any further comment, Supervisor Toffenali? Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Madam Clerk, oh, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, you need a break? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking a 10-minute break.